Hi, my name is Vultureboy, and I wanted to do a very quick breakdown of some sounds behind my song Leviathan, taken from my debut mixtape Vagabond, out everywhere you listen to music. All right, so this session is super weird, but it's also an instrumental that I'm incredibly proud of. I also tried to clean it up a lot because I'm actually pretty embarrassed about how messy my sessions look, but I don't think I've met a producer with uh clean, super neat sessions, especially when like you're in the middle of cooking. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a lot, but actually doing this deep dive and revisit into the sounds behind this track really makes me scratch my head in like the best ways because I'm like, oh my god, I forgot that was even in there. I think that's like one of the joys of being a producer. But uh, I guess for a little bit of context around Leviathan, I'm really inspired by video game themes and OSTs in general. And one of my favorite games of all time is Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition. And a lot of the soundtrack from that game inspires a lot of the sounds that goes into Vulture Boy's sound, like, songs, excuse me. And this particular theme or this particular song was inspired by the Cerberus battle theme, which is one of the first bosses you fight inside of Devil May Cry 3, but has possibly the sickest bass line in terms of like its theme. So initially Leviathan started off with an attempt to sample it, and it didn't really go well, but I love that bass line so much that I wanted to make some kind of homage to it instead of that very movement filled bass line. I wanted to go for something uh a bit more stripped back, but still something that retains that power. Let me play for you the instrumental as is, and then we can go into each part and break it apart from there. All right. So, in order to not make this a jumbled mess, I will just warn you all in advance. There are a lot of tracks in this session, which is a little embarrassing, but also kind of really cool. Um, and for example, I'm a firm believer in layers. I won't really go through vocals too much, but I do double track, sometimes triple track a lot of vocals. I also have like a lot of layers, me yelling and ad libs and all that kind of stuff. I think it adds to kind of like the power and the movement of a song, kind of. And I've always liked the wall of sound approach to music, and I think after being in bands and stuff for a while, a lot of the mixing and tracking choices that I make kind of feel as if you'd be demoing for some kind of like hardcore band, because that's just kind of what I'm used to. So a lot of double tracking and like just stacking certain things and certain elements to kind of make them thicker is kind of my approach. And I'm no expert when it comes to producing or anything like that, but it's something where I follow the golden rule of if it sounds good, then it sounds pretty good. But I won't be going through vocals right now. I'll probably save that for another video, maybe another part, but maybe. But there's a lot there, so we don't have to go through that. I really wanted to start, however, with the instrumental of this because there are a lot of layers, and I guess I'm just gonna go as I see them. So this very first section, I love pads. I love elements that kind of are able to take up small pockets in like the mix, because you may not necessarily notice how much they add, but I think that doubling things or having something with like a strong backing, especially melodically, like helps fit up like fill up a lot of dead space. So yeah, I love pads, and since I'm also a lover of orchestra and stuff, I've always wanted to like incorporate those elements into Vulture Boy stuff. So here we have some movement from that same segment. This is once again Leviathan. I'm a lover of distorted textures and sounds, so I love keeping that element when it comes to, the pads that I choose. But instead of, well, not even instead of, but in addition to this particular like lightly distorted pad, I do have a really rough lower distortion that I use. And if I'm not mistaken, I may be mistaken, but this may be the distortion that you see or you hear in like the intro. Let me see what's going on. I have to find another segment. I think so. I'm pretty sure. That's one of my favorite sounds that I've ever made. And essentially, it's a bunch of shit going through a bit crusher, going through a PCM bit crusher. And this is just a sequence that pulled from Vital. And I just basically decided to beat the shit out of it. And I love the way it came out. Honestly, it's really really fun. So I used it as the intro because in the background you can kind of hear this, which is like I love that so much. I think I wanted to find a way to enhance that and use that kind of as a melodic element in the song itself. So underneath that, you have this res bass. Well, I'm not even sure if that's like the proper name for it, but I guess it's a res bass. But I know there's like a dubstep or a DJ named Res that my partners put me on, and so I was like, yeah, you know what, let's just do that. But that's this little number here. I absolutely love how gross that sounds, and I needed something that was low enough to kind of like make sure the entire piece had some grounding, but also was like thick and nasty. So I really really love how like gross that bass came out. Honestly, the grosser the better, but I feel like that's like the most disgusting I can get without it being too out of control. And there's a lot of like noisy elements in this song already, so I had to be careful. Next is possibly word. Next is possibly my favorite part of this particular song, and it's all of the drums. And there are so many elements to it, but I'm going to first play you basically all of the parts together, and you'll kind of get a general idea as to what I'm going for, and then we'll just like loop through what's already there. So we'll go from that same segment that we listened to earlier. Here are the drums. This is including some layered kicks, a layered snare, something I like to call a boof kick, which is just like a big, like disgusting, like in the back of your kick. But here we go. Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and I'm not gonna really like go through like all of these, but I guess to like give like a high level overview of what the hell is happening here. So first, I love D&B loops. I think they're really really fun. I think they're kind of like the backbone of the Vultureboy sound. Nice drum and bass cut up pattern, and then some weird rapping and dramatic chord progressions. But the drum and bass is like the core element of the song that's like really really carrying it through. And what I love about drum and bass loops is that cutting them up like oftentimes makes them like way cooler. So let me just play it. Watch. Yeah, so it already sounds really really cool, but I love trying to figure out like what pattern that I want to go with when it comes to the D&B loops, and then layering the hell out of them with snares and everything like that. So here I have a cool snare double and a cool kick. I'm just gonna play them both. pretty cool. Like it's way thicker when you add on kind of like the kick double and the snare double. And then just to make it even worse, I just picked the grossest kick that I can find at the time and use that as like another kind of like punchy kick that cuts through the mix. Like the idea behind this is that like when people and I've gotten this tip from a friend of mine who's a producer and who produces like deathcore bands and whatever. Sometimes, a lot of the time, for breakdowns and heightened elements of the song, like if it's not just like an automation trick, producers would double a kick just to kind of have certain moments be a bit more impactful. It may not be like the most mix friendly, but it just sounds really, really good. So yeah, always go with that. But this is the whole loop with the boof kick. Very cool. Just to keep it going with the drums, I layered the hell out of this drums with a bunch of ride samples. I believe these are like rendered samples from like a contact library. I really don't remember, being honest. But I love the brightness that real drums bring to even like heavily distorted loops. So I wanted to kind of add that element there too. And for example, this is what it sounds like with the bass. We have our lead. I like to call this like my pride and joy. To me, this was the glue that kind of put the song together. Once this lead was figured out, like once I figured out what the melody is gonna be, like I was bouncing off the walls. I knew this was kind of like I knew this was gonna be my favorite song. So here we go. So that's an electric piano sample, and I'm just kind of crushing the shit out of it, just to give it a kind of more distressed sound. And then I'm layering behind it just some weird opposing melody pads. So it goes like ba da da da, and it's really really sick. Just listen to them together. And you know what's even crazier? The best part about going through these tracks is finding out that there were even more elements. I forgot that I put an entire orchestra in this song, and it's funny because orchestra shows up in everything that I work on because I grew up listening to bands like Epica, like Within Temptation, like Leaves Eyes, and like and I feel like orchestra and like choirs and stuff has always been a really big element to bands like Nightwish and whatever that are really really carried with me. So that will never leave. I feel like you're always going to find some kind of orchestra or moody pad in the background, and I blame those bands for it. But here's some cool moody orchestra that you probably didn't really hear in the mix when the part actually shows up. Now, pads don't always have to be melodic to serve like value in a song. I love the texture that really, really like kind of airy pads bring to pieces. So here's what I got for a layer I named Spooky Pad. And I wanted something subtle like that kind of sits in the front of everything because behind it I threw these really uh beautiful kind of like phasey video gamey pads behind it, and that's like the main pad that you hear. It's the main pad combo that you hear in the mix, which is really cool. So I love the way that it sounded the with the chorus, with the energy of the song. I feel like having something that has that kind of otherworldly feel to it, it kind of added like a whole new breath of life to like the song. And also it's more opportunity for me to play with cool chord progressions. So, in terms of high level, that's the overall grouping of everything happening in Leviathan aside from vocals, because there's a lot more elements to the song. But when you have all of those elements together, you get something cool like this.